I believe I just saw some great news when it comes to Cardano. And what is that? Did you know that ADA, which is Cardano's native token, it was recently announced by the Cardano Foundation how, again, ADA is included in the new NASDAQ and CME Group index futures alongside Bitcoin, Ethereum, and as well as some others. I think this right here is such a big milestone. It's a big accomplishment. And I'll talk about why I think this matters in today's video, even though this is just my personal opinion. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, and nothing I say is financial advice. But I think this right here, again, ADA literally being included in the new NASDAQ and CME Group index futures, this right here, I think does give Cardano a little bit more legitimacy. It wasn't like Cardano was so bad anyways, but at the same time, this does give it more legitimacy because let's take this into consideration. If let's say they want to partner up with enterprises moving forward, they can point to this, right? They can say, hey, we've done this in the past. Did you know that, again, ADA is included in the new NASDAQ and CME Group index futures? So we got to let that sink in. This could help Cardano have better partnerships moving forward because this, again, could hypothetically give it a little bit more legitimacy. It's like, for instance, applying for a job. We can showcase a resume, right? We can say, hey, we worked in this place for this long. These were the projects that we worked on. We can point to that, right? So it's kind of a little bit no different here. I think that Cardano moving forward, they can point to something like this if, let's say, they want to have bigger and better partnerships moving forward. Keep in mind, Cardano just recently did a partnership with the Brazilian Olympic Committee. So we got to let that sink in. This is another accomplishment that Cardano has achieved basically in quite a relatively short amount of time. So I think as time goes by, more and more people are recognizing Cardano as this layer one blockchain that could actually have an impact, right? Not just some random layer one blockchain that's there to simply exist. It doesn't seem like that to me. Oftentimes, people like to say that, oh, Cardano is only too focused on the retail side of things. Well, that's actually not true. Case in point, take a look at what the Cardano Foundation has done as of late. Not to mention, there was this statistic not too long ago, even posted by the Cardano Foundation, indicating how Cardano was affecting over 10,000 farms. That's really impressive. So we got to think about this. Even when it comes to the case of agriculture, Cardano is somewhat making an impact. That's the thing. Not to mention as well, now we're seeing it when it comes to the Olympics, right? Because they had a partnership with the Brazilian Olympic Committee, and now seeing ADA in the new NASDAQ and CME Group index futures, it's a big thumbs up for me. I think this showcases the progression when it comes to Cardano. Now, people like to say, well, if this is all so cool, if this is all so interesting, why is ADA still at around 17 cents? Well, first of all, it's recovered around 3% in the past 24 hours, which is nothing really to brag home about, right? It's nothing that's going to blow my hair back, not too impressive. But at the same time, what Cardano is doing right now, it goes far beyond just the simple price charts. It goes far beyond that. I think this, if anything, kind of highlights that Cardano, behind the scenes, they may be doing a lot of things. But again, this space doesn't really operate in the same way that stocks do. It's like, for instance, if a company out there does something really amazing, they launch a fantastic product, let's say their net profit is looking amazing and their profit margin is looking awesome. You know, if we see all of that, usually it's affected in terms of the stock price, right? Where we see it sometimes appreciate. But when it comes to this case, it's a little bit different because projects within this space, let's say they can have an amazing partnership, they can be listed in somewhere amazing, but it doesn't really matter too much because it's oftentimes affected by not only Bitcoin, but also the larger market sentiment overall. So it's a little bit different than in the case of stocks. However, I don't really mind this space despite that because usually we see what happens if the market recovers. Like for instance, some other markets out there doing like a 20, 30, or 40% movement, it could take years in some cases. But when it comes to this case, we've seen sometimes that hypothetically, if the market really were to wake up, I've seen historically things move like 20 or 30% just within like hours. I'm not saying it could happen here, but I'm just saying that's what I've noticed. But besides that point, keep in mind, when it comes to this space, things could go up or down in a pretty rapid way. So this space, in my opinion, is not a place where I would want to be at if I was so worried about that. Also, for instance, when it comes to this space as well, yeah, sure, if the market recovers, usually we sometimes see it hypothetically pretty quickly. But it could also take some time for that to happen. And it takes a lot of waiting, in my opinion, in some cases. It might not be like a decade when compared to other markets out there, but there is still some waiting involved in my opinion, unless I became a trader and I cared about this in just an hourly basis or whatever, then that's completely different, but I'm not a trader, right? I treat this more like a moment where I have to wait, but maybe not multiple decades like some other markets out there, or maybe even a decade or whatever. But that's just besides the point. That's just kind of the mentality that I have. And we have to consider in 2025, when it comes to ADA, it was like hovering at around $1, basically, at certain points. And if we take a look at it, being at 17 cents currently, quite evidently, ADA is over 5 times lower than $1. Now, people like to say, but yeah, what makes you think it could ever go back to 2025 levels? Now, I'll never be able to know for sure, but one thing I do know, though, is that 2025 was not an altcoin season. In fact, ADA was doing a lot better, kind of near the end of 2024, right? If we think about it. So even 2025 was not such a amazing time for Cardano. It wasn't really the case. So when I take a look at something like this, if it could just go back to around $1, again, we're over 5 times lower than that, which is kind of ridiculous because at around $1, it wasn't even considered that good anyways when it comes to ADA. So it kind of showcases that the bar for ADA to just go back to $1, it doesn't seem so outlandish, right? $1 is not its all-time high, far from it actually. If we take a look at ADA, its all-time high is around $3. So $1 is 3 times lower than $3. So when it comes to this, it's not like ADA needs to break a new all-time high or whatever like that in order to hypothetically reach $1. Not really. I mean, again, we just saw $1 pretty much last year. It's nothing too significant in the grand scheme of things, and it kind of showcases how the market doesn't need to do so hypothetically fantastic, as evidently as what we've seen in the past, in order for ADA to maybe go back to $1. But that's just my perspective. And when it comes to Cardano, people like to say, but wow, take a look at ADA. It's currently ranked 16th in the world in terms of market cap. Like, that's really bad. But here's the thing, Cardano doesn't really need to do much better than this. Like, if it could just maintain this, basically, maybe let's just say maintain a top 15 position, right? If it could just do that heading into a hypothetical altcoin season, or maybe heading into a better change in market sentiment, like, what more could I even really ask for at that point? The thing is, Cardano doesn't really need to do anything so special. If it could just maintain its kind of position, more or less, heading into a better change in market sentiment, that's kind of it, right? I mean, if we think about it, ADA at one point was around $1 last year. Was it like top 5 in the world? No. So it doesn't really need to do anything groundbreaking just because ADA is so low currently. Now, people like to tell me and sometimes express how $1 is their average cost. So they say that, okay, if ADA goes back to $1, who really cares? Like, that's just breaking even. Sometimes they like to tell me that. But kind of my mindset is this. Again, ADA as of right now is over 5 times lower than $1, right? So assuming if my average cost was $1, and as of right now ADA is at around 17 cents, because I'm slowly but surely dollar cost averaging once a month at these levels, even though I am not telling anyone to do anything, what happens is that naturally over time, my average cost is going to go lower and lower and lower. So what happens? Maybe because previously in the past, it was at $1 in terms of the average cost. Now, because I'm dollar cost averaging at a lower level, maybe it goes down to like 30 cents or 35 cents or something like that, right? In which case, if let's say the average cost is 35 cents, as of right now, we're still around 2 times lower than that. But the thing is, if ADA goes back to $1, 35 cents is around 3 times lower than $1. So yeah, sure, if my average cost is $1, going back to $1 is just breaking even. But if I'm using low cost moments to basically lower down my average cost, what happens is that now that if it recovers to $1, it's no longer breaking even. So that's just kind of my personal mentality. I'm just using low prices to lower down my average cost, so that way if it goes back to $1, it won't be just breaking even, if that's the way I would even want to put it. But yeah, that's just my opinion as of right now. And when it comes to Cardano, I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward because, when it comes to Cardano, they've been making a lot of updates as of late. It's not like they're not doing anything. So yeah, sure, people can say, oh, Cardano's cooked and all this. The founder, when it comes to Charles Hoskinson, they say, oh, he's done for, he doesn't care about the project anymore. But actually, Charles kind of admitting how he has no control over Cardano, I think is an amazing thing. A lot of people want Cardano to be led, for whatever reason, by Charles Hoskinson, but it just kind of doesn't make sense. Him kind of admitting he has no control basically means that Cardano is hypothetically a lot more decentralized. So why is that a bad thing? So I think it's actually a good thing, but again, I'll be sure to make more updates moving forward. So I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day.